Hello, friend. My name is Derek Harder, and in this video, we're going to continue looking at generative AI. In particular, we're going to look at what's known as neural style transfer here. So this is another image generation technique. It has some similarities to the DeepDream, which is why we looked at that first. So it's the same basic idea. We're going to create a loss function in order to optimize some things that we specify in our loss function here. So, I mean, this neural style kind of transfer, my understanding is that this is basically the same kind of stuff if you've ever used like photo apps on your phone or thing in order to apply a filter or that fun stuff like that. It's probably using something like this kind of neural style that we're going to transfer that we're going to discuss here. So this has kind of a long history in text generation and image processing community. But this kind of style transfer was not very successful until deep learning and deep neural networks kind of came on the scene. And then it became really possible to do the sort of style transfer that we're going to look at here that people wanted to do beforehand. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and jump in and see how this works. Okay, so basically what we're going to be doing here is trying to transfer a style from a reference image. Okay, so a style in the context of people that did this essentially means, you know, the textures and colors of the visual pattern. So in this case, the example would use the Starry Night, Van Gogh's Starry Night image as the style reference. So we kind of want to transfer that style, apply it to a target image. So that's the content target here. So in this type of image generation, we have two images, the target content and a style reference. And we want to combine those so we have a new combination image that has the same content as the original, but is in the style of the reference style image. Okay, so the way we're going to be doing this, the key idea is it's the same idea that's central to all deep learning algorithms. We're going to define a loss function that specifies quantitatively what we mean by content and style. So that's what we want to achieve. We want to achieve a combination image that has that's similar to the content of the original, has the same content, but has the same style as the reference style, right? So if you can quantify those things, content and style, as a loss function, then you can do some sort of optimization to maximize or minimize that loss function. All right, so we know what we want to achieve, right? We want to conserve the content of the original image while adopting the style of the reference, okay? So, you know, in kind of pseudo code, if we had something that could measure so a function that could measure the style, we could take our reference image and our attempt to combine the reference image into our new image, measure the style of those and the difference, right? So here we're back to doing a minimization for this loss here, because basically if they have exactly the same style, the difference of that would be zero for this hypothetical style function to measure style, right? So if they have exactly the same style, the difference should be zero. The bigger the style difference, the larger that is, right? And then, you know, we want to have some distance function that measures these. Likewise, so notice that for content, if we can have a similar function that can measure content, what we want to do is measure the difference between the content of the original image. So again, we're trying to replicate the content from the original image and apply the style from the reference image. So, you know, our loss function would be the distance for the difference between the content of the original and this new combined image that we're doing. Right? And again, if the content were exactly the same, that should be zero. So we'd have a distance of zero. And the further the content away are, the larger that would be, right? So that would end up giving us a loss function that we want to minimize again in this case, right? So the fundamental observation of applying deep networks to this, and again, we're going to be using convolutional networks, is that they offer a way to mathematically define a style and content measurement that we can use for a loss function. So a little bit more about the content and loss style functions that we'll define. So we'll kind of bottom line it here, but you'll see in a little bit more detail when we look at the example. So the argument went for this original method for doing this sort of neural style transfer is that with a convolutional network, remember, with the hierarchy of features, you expect the content of the image to be mostly captured by upper layer convolutional layers, okay? So by that argument, if the upper layers that have the more abstract global features give you some measure of content, then a good candidate for the measurement of similarity of content or your content loss function is the norm between the activations of an upper layer in a pre-trained convolutional network computed over, so you give it the target image and the generated image, right? So the target image is the one that is an input that you're trying to preserve the content of, and the generated image is the one that you're trying to take your source image and apply a style to, right? Likewise, it's argued that you can use convolutional layers to give a measurement of style, but in this case, content only uses upper layer, but style involves things at all different spatial layers. So you want to use all of the different layers, and for style, you want to use something like a correlation or a similarity. So in this function, we'll use the inner product, which gives a kind of correlation of feature maps of different layers, and these will be, from low to high level, a couple of different selected layers. And again, this is a correlation between the style image and the generated image, that's combining the style and the content of the two, right? So we'll select a couple of layers, do an inner product to get a correlation, which hopefully should get a measure of the style of these two images, right? So to summarize that, you can use a pre-trained convolutional network to define a loss function that we can minimize in this case, that will preserve content by maintaining similar high-level activations between the image that whose content we want and our generated image, right? So we'll just select some high-level layer and compare their activations using an L2 norm. And likewise, we can get a style for our loss function measurement by maintaining similarities, so correlations with activations for layers in different levels, low to high, between the style image and the image that we're attempting to generate. Okay. So let's look at an example of implementing this kind of neural style transfer using Keras. So we need a pre-trained convolutional network. So we'll use VGG 19. So we used VGG 16, I believe, previously. So it's a similar one in that sequence of networks that were trained on the ImageNet data set. And we're going to use layer activations like we just described to define a loss function that tries to be a loss that's measuring content and style of a new image. And since since it's ideal when those are zero, we are doing a minimization problem in this case. So if our loss is zero, that's the best we can do. If it's zero for both the content measurement, the distance between the content and the difference between the style. So if that loss function works the way we want it to, we can then set up a normal graded descent process, which would be similar to the previous ones that we see. So let's start by getting we need two images. We need the base image that has the content we want, and we need the style image. And again, we're just going to be using the Van Gogh, and we'll be using a landscape from San Francisco that at least most students here in the United States might be more familiar with this landscape, but the same style image that we want to transfer here. We'll need some utility images about the same as in our previous example. to pre-process these the way that our VGG19 convolutional network needs, and then to take the results of those and put them back into images that we can actually look at. So we need a feature extractor. In this case, we're actually going to have it so that all of the layers, we can extract the features out of here. Okay? So we didn't actually have a list of layers. We just took all layers that we could find in the VGG19 model for our feature extractor. So we get the activations after we feed an image as input into this model. Okay, so let's define our loss function then. So the content loss is relatively simple compared to the other ones here. So we're actually going to be passing in the activations for a layer here. So these might not be great names for the parameters, but we're going to be doing a simple sum of our squared differences for defining our contents loss, which would be the difference between activations on a final upper layer for the image that's the base image. So in this code, base image is the one whose content we're trying to transfer, and then the combination image is the resulting image that we're working on building up here. For style, basically, it's really, I might have said something a little bit wrong. It's really the dot product between the activations and themselves. So if you look at it here, we are doing a matrix multiplication of the features and themselves here. That's kind of what this gram matrix is doing. So you're kind of getting the correlations between the style image and, again, the combination image, but then we do the square differences with some other normalization here. So don't worry, don't sweat the details too much, but it is doing kind of a correlation, and this is going to be multiple layers that happen, get called for the style loss here, the layers that we pick that we want to keep the style for. There's another one that we didn't talk about before, a variational loss that presumably by practice was added in. So you can think of this as a regularization term. So again, all we're doing is taking the actual pixels and calculating something over those. So again, if these, if we don't maintain this variation loss, so if our image itself is not kind of similar on this, this will be big. It'll be it works kind of like regularization that we've talked about previously in this class here. So our actual loss function then looks something like this. So here we're defining basically, I think there's 5 blocks in this VGG19 that we're using. So the first convolution layer of every block from the lowest to the highest level we'll use for our style loss here. So there's 5 of these. And we're using just that one block, the second convolution layer in the highest level for our content loss. So these work as kind of the importance of each of our 3 contributions to the variation. So yeah, I don't know how you would go about kind of figuring out good initial values for these, but the relative value of these is kind of what's important, right? So in this case, we're giving equal importance. So this is 1/1,000,000th for both of these. So that's higher than 10 to the minus 8 here. So we're giving equal importance to the style and that third total variation weight. And we give a little bit less importance to the content weight, but definitely tweaking these 3 would give you different results on your image, right? So to compute the loss, we basically have to compute the loss for each of those 3 things. So that's all that's happened here. So we start with a loss of 0. And this actually calculates the content loss. So we're pulling out the features and from the base image and the combination image here. So again, just to be clear on this, so notice basically we're using that feature extractor. So really these are the activations from all the layers. So layer features here is the activation for the features for our content layer name that we chose. So the convolution 2 in the last block of VGG19 here. Right? So again, basically we're passing in the activations for that, for our base image and our combination to get the loss for the content loss, multiplying that by that content weight, and adding that to our loss. Right? For the layers, since we have 5 layers, however many layers are in that list of style layer names, we're doing a similar thing to get their activations and computing that using the style loss. And then finally, the total variational loss is just on the combination image. So it's kind of like a regularization term on the image pixels. And then for our optimization using gradient descent, we're doing something a little bit different here. So we do have a function that does like a single step, similar to what we've done before. So for inside of the context of a gradient tape, we'll compute our loss on the combination image, base image, and style reference image passed in there. So that will give us the gradients with respect to the combination image that we have here, because that's the thing that we're modifying. So we want the loss with respect to that. So we are going to be just using a Keras optimizer. We're using this feature that we might have seen a little bit before, but I guess in practice they found that modifying the learning rate. So we start off with a relatively high learning rate, and it will decrease as we do multiple epochs of training here. So initially we'll be making big steps when the learning rate is high, and it'll go down to smaller and smaller steps as we're getting closer to the image that we want. Right? So notice here that we have to do the pre-processing for the VGG19. So we pre-process the base and the style image. The initial combination image is just the base image. Okay, although we have to wrap it in a TensorFlow variable because we're going to be modifying this. So this needs to be something that we can actually mutate or modify. That's why it needs to be in a TensorFlow variable. But otherwise, so we're just going to by hand do our iterations, but we're going to get the gradients and ask our stochastic gradient descent optimizer to apply those gradients for us. So it's going to be applying using the learning rate to update basically the pixel values in our image based on the gradients here. So to see how this is working, then we actually say this as we're iterating over our epochs of the training. So let's go ahead and let that run and see how it does. Actually, I can just let that keep running. Most people should be able to run this. It takes less than a minute, probably. So it takes maybe 20 or 30 seconds on GPU here. But yeah, you should see it. It'll start off with a loss of 8,000, and it'll go down. So the final result is pretty good compared to like the example showing. So this is the example after running 4,000 iterations here of applying our style here. So note, kind of another note on this, just so you have an idea of how this actually works in practice. So like if you're using a filter on like a phone app to get your faces like a dog or something like that, this process is pretty slow. You wouldn't want to do this. But what you can do is you can train and build a bunch of example images where you apply a style that you want to a bunch of different base images to get the resulting. And then you could use that as a data set to train a traditional convolutional network, right? So if you train a convolutional network on, say, if you do this 1,000 times or maybe more for a base image with the same style, you can have a convolutional network that's trained, and a convolutional network will be really fast once it's trained to apply a particular style. And something like that can easily be put into an application to add in filters to a photo app or something like that. All right, so just to summarize some of the things that we learned in this video. So style transfer consists of creating a new image that preserves the content of one target image and also captures the style of a reference image. Okay? So there's lots of useful applications for this kind of image generation, transferring this sort of style. So the key, the thing that makes it work, is that we can actually use a trained convolutional network to define loss functions that give us measurements of content of images and style of images. So like we discussed, content can be captured by a high-level activation of a convolutional layer, and style can be captured by doing a correlation of activations in different layers of a convolutional network. So this sort of style transfer can then be formulated as an optimization process using that loss defined using a pre-trained convolutional network. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hope that gave you a little bit of an idea of some other kinds of image generation that you can do. And then I hope you stick with us for the next one. So our next videos, we're going to be looking at autoencoders and GANs, which are some more advanced kind of concepts for image generation and sequence generation. All right, so I'll see you later.